youth to learn, to get inspired, and to help boost the nation's economy. Let's take a look at the audiovisual.
They are young. They are a fierce force. 54% of India under 35. 1/5 of the world's youngest population. 15 million enter the job market annually, and they are steering India's economy. They are the ideators, innovators, and entrepreneurs of India. The young trailblazers will ensure India hits the $10 trillion economy target. Their vision for India is rooted in India. Joining us today at the India Economic Summit 2022 are the dynamic new founders and entrepreneurs of a new India to talk on Young India Inc.
I'd like to now invite Mr. Shravan Sen, Senior Editor, Republic Media Network, to moderate this session. As speakers, we have Mr. Pranav Pai, Founding Partner and Chief Investment Officer at 314 Capital. As CIO, Mr. Pai has over 70 seed and venture capital investments across several investment categories in India and the US. He's deeply involved in the startup ecosystem in India and has served as the co-president of Stanford Angels and Entrepreneurs India and the national vice chairman of the IMA Young Leaders Council. Mr. Pai has also received the 35 Under 35 award from Entrepreneur Magazine India. Mr. Nikhil Kamath, co-founder of Zerodha and True Beacon. Zerodha is an Indian institutional brokerage firm and a trading platform. Mr. Kamath started working at a call center at a young age of 17 before he started his business in 2010. Zerodha's business took a huge leap amid the COVID-19 pandemic when its user base grew 100% every month. Mr. Kamath has recently topped Hurun India's 40 and under self-made rich list of 2022. Of course, Nikhil Kamath will be joining us live from Jaipur. Ms. Upasana Taku, co-founder and COO of MobiKwik. Ms. Taku was listed on the Forbes list of Asia's 25 most powerful businesswomen in 2019. She was also recognized as the first woman to lead a payments startup by the President of India in 2018. MobiKwik in the year 22 recorded an 80% jump in its revenue, and prior to MobiKwik, she held senior positions at PayPal and at HSBC. And Mr. Keshav Bhajanka, Executive Director of CenturyPly, the man behind the company's stellar growth of decorative verticals, which includes successful implementation of new supply chain projects and foray into new business. CenturyPly, of course, is an industry leader and recognized as one of the best plywood brands in India. It's over to you, Shravan.
In fact, we've got a fantastic panel to start our day with. In a short while from now, Upasana would also be joining in. Let me begin by saying this, ladies and gentlemen. This entire rise of India is perhaps the biggest story in the global economy in the last few years. And when the managing director of the IMF essentially says that India should be considered in the bright spot in these otherwise dark horizon, she's essentially reiterating what we all Indian feel. We will become the next economic superpower. And how is that really possible, ladies and gentlemen? That's because when we have young entrepreneurs like them on the stage, and Nikhil, who is also joining us, they're the risk takers. All of this becomes possible. And we have that faith. And the Prime Minister rightly says that if today India has reached a position number 3 in the world when it comes of creating startups, it's all because of the risk takers like Pranav, Keshav, as well as Nikhil. In fact, I would like to begin the session first with Nikhil, because Nikhil, I would describe him, he fits that description that today's entrepreneurs are like modern day cowboys. Simply because he started off with about an 8,000 rupees call center job, has become a billionaire, and in his recent blog he says, We need to have a stupid faith to believe that everything will work out. So, Nikhil, I want to start with you. For becoming a superpower, would you say that we really need to have that stupid faith, as you call it, stupid faith that we will achieve it?
I think largely as a country, we do feel a lot of optimism on the ground. I would say even outside of India, when you talk to international investors today, they might not be very optimistic about their own countries, but when they talk about India, it's always with a lot of optimism. So I'm sure we're on the right path. We need to be cognizant to the bumps on the road along the way. The very near future looks slightly tumultuous with all the different headwinds we have from inflation, interest rates going up in the West, higher cost of borrowing. So I think while we remain extremely optimistic about the future as a country, it's also probably wise to look at the short-term problems that there might be in industries across the board and plan accordingly as well.
Let me bring in Pranav, because what I find very interesting in Pranav, in your profile, is the way you've handled it in terms of your selection of investments, be it in Yulu, as I was talking to Keshav a short while back in the back room. Why Yulu? And there are several others, and one would say these are non-mainstream companies like Koo, for that matter, Licious. It does appear there is a pattern, Pranav, in your thinking, and that is essentially investment in businesses which has a direct impact in everyday life. How would you say that perhaps this is the direction perhaps that we need to take forward in terms of building a superpower, in the right investment, choosing something that is going to have a direct impact?
Yeah, certainly. I think that's a great way to actually encapsulate what we look for. I think India is this very strange ecosystem now, where it's a large country, there's 1.4 billion people, it's the youngest country in the world, it's such a dynamic economy now. And we still have fundamental problems that we can solve. And of course, we can build young companies, startups, use technology to address those challenges. So that's what we do in venture capital. We study markets closely. We're surprised by how many obvious non-mainstream opportunities there still are in India. You mentioned a few of them, from electric vehicles to food to commerce to banking. And we've tried to find the right founders with the right domain knowledge and hopefully be the best partners we can as they build from 0 to 100. In fact, some of the people here, like Nikhil, Upasana, they encapsulate that story of starting with that idea, being the best people for that specific challenge and working non-stop to get that problem solved at scale. And in India today, scale means 1 billion people. Like Mr. Nilikani says, we are the only population scale country with open digital platforms, with the internet in 800 million people's hands, with 600 million smartphones, 1.4 billion people with unique identification. It's an extremely interesting place to invest, and we couldn't be happier that India is finally the top 3 in the world today.
Keshav, if I can bring you in, because Keshav has a very interesting thing that perhaps not many know, is that he loves to throw surprises, especially when he has his board meetings. And he loves to come up with ideas, innovations. I think that's one aspect, innovation, that we need to talk about. Because for a company like yours, a legacy company like yours, when you go into that boardroom and when you are discussing of the idea forward, India's growth story and companies like your contribution to it, do you really feel that innovation, when we talk about innovation, we're still a little bit of skeptical, especially when it comes from legacy companies like yours?
It's a very good point. When it comes to innovation, I think the way that we have, come up is that we believe what has got us here today is not going to take us to where we want to go. In essence, you need to do things a little differently. When COVID struck, when we were all scrambling to see what to do next, how to proceed, so on and so forth, somebody in the plant came up with an idea saying, what if we make plywood that is virus free? And initially everyone was laughing, but we sat down and we said, why not? You see it in so many other products, refrigerators and others, and so on and so forth. So we took up the challenge, and by the grace of God, we were able to bring up a product, the first in the world, that was antiviral plywood. So, that really helped us get out of COVID at a faster pace than others in the industry. So, innovation, I think it is critical for a company to remain a market leader, if it's already one, or to become a market leader. Today, whether it is in product, whether it is in process, I'll give you one more example. We implemented a Salesforce automation tool. Sounds very simple, but it's a mindset change. Now, when we are implementing this tool, every single salesman would tell us, "Sir, मैं कर लूँगा, लेकिन sale zero हो जाएगा, sale गिर जाएगा." So, as a salesman, I got scared. I was like, "मत करो." When COVID came, sale was already zero. For a month and a half, we sold nothing. So I said, "Boss, अब क्या गिराओगे?" Now, implement it. So today, by virtue of a little luck, of a few innovations, we have reached where we are today, and this is now a philosophy that we follow.
Let me also welcome Upasana. Upasana also has a lovely story in which I would say that this is exactly what defines India and how things are really changing. Upasana, I think so. When we really look at your story of how you started in Dwarka with your company, with your husband, you've shattered all glass ceilings. There's absolutely no doubt about it. But there's one question that I really want to ask you is that you were working with some of the most high impact projects, millions of dollars abroad. What is that one aspect brought you back to India, and what is it that you saw that yes, it is changing in India, we need to be part of this growth story?
So, thank you everyone for having me here today. And so to the question to this answer is curiosity, opportunity. I was very well established in my career in the Silicon Valley. I was working with PayPal, which was at the time and continues to be today global leader in payments. And I was getting the opportunities of a lifetime. I got to launch PayPal in several new markets in Europe. I got to acquire a company along with the team at PayPal in Tel Aviv. So it was a very nice fast track career that I was on. But after doing that for 3-4 years, I was like, what next? The quantum of the project has gone from 20 to 50 to $200 million, but what next? And there is still a lot of innovation happening. Since then, many more decacons in payments and fintech have happened in the US. But in developed markets, what happens is that the innovation opportunities are more incremental in nature, and emerging market opportunity is really fundamental. When I came back to India at the end of 2008, we had about 15 million digitally paying users in a country of 1 billion. Today that number has of course exploded, and we have 250 to 300 million Indians who pay digitally. But still, there's still a very large runway of growth, right? Because it's a country of 1.3 billion, 800 million have bank account but are still paying using cash, non-digital. So there's a lot more to be done, and that's still scratching the tip of the iceberg, because if I look at other financial products, even today, despite all the digital transformation that has happened in the last 5 to 10 years, less than 70 million Indians have access to credit. Less than 30 million Indians invest or have access to insurance. So, all these numbers are less than 10% of the population of India. So, from an innovation and opportunity point of view, it's like a greenfield. I think 100 more unicorns can be created just in the fintech space in India, which is, by the way, already the third largest fintech opportunity globally after US and China. So I do believe that engineers, business people, marketeers who want to create net new products and services from scratch, whether consumer facing, small business facing, all of these opportunities are immense. And if you want to make millions of dollars and be in a cushy job, there are opportunities in India as well as globally. But if you really want to have impact, and if that's what drives you, then India is a huge growth story. And I would love to see, we already have 100 plus unicorns. I would love to see that number be 1,000 in the next few years. So that's sort of my big thing.
Perhaps that's the aim. Pranav, I think so. I would like to bring you on this, because you and your brother, you both have been extremely bullish about the Indian economy, saying that perhaps by the end of this decade, you're projecting that India could be, the third largest economy just behind the US and even for China for that matter. I want to understand from you, what's the way forward in terms of the challenges as Upasana was also pointing out, that we know where to go. How do we really go about it? And when you've yourself said that this is the decade for India's entrepreneurship and startups, how do you define that?
Yeah, I think a lot of things have come together to give us that confidence for this decade. I think the first thing we see, given we graduated from the education system a decade or less ago, there's been a cultural change in the young people of India. There's a confidence in this country, in this economy, in being Indian, in remaining here, in solving India's problems that we hadn't seen when we were in school or college before. There's a confidence and an inspiration from the first batch of successful Indian founders, startup operators, entrepreneurs, so many of whom are on stage. There's a big cultural change in the next set of operators taking over India's largest companies. For example, at Century right here. All that happening at the same time is a very strange coincidence. And it's taken 30, 40, 50 years of 2 generations of Indians making sacrifices, building every day, staying back here, going through tough times, to be honest, to get the country to where it is today. So I think the first thing we always talk about is we try to make the awareness of this cultural change as widespread as possible. Many people still don't believe this is happening. Many people in government still have other bigger challenges to solve, so this part is outside, it's in the rear view mirror, if you will. So we think if we embrace this cultural change, we'll notice we have this very natural tide in our favor. And if we harness it correctly, it's, in my opinion, the energy for that flywheel that takes us to the third largest economy over the next 10 to 15 years. Now there's only Japan and Germany ahead of us, around $4 trillion. We're at around 3. China and US, of course, are past 10. So for us, it's no longer about how do we be better than China, better than US. We need to set a simpler goal. 5 trillion, as the Prime Minister said, we'll get there very quickly. The only other country in the world to cross 10 in the next 10 to 15 years, 10 trillion should be our real goal. And at 10 trillion, India is wealthy, our systems, our business are formalized, Indians can spend, they're voting in the favor of the businesses that solve the best problems in their life every day. Another very interesting thing is now you can buy the stock of your favorite brands, your favorite internet companies in the public markets. They've gone IPO, and you can vote in favor of your favorite companies by actually becoming shareholders yourself. So there's this big transformation that's happened in the last 15 years that if we continue on this trajectory, I think we're definitely going to be the top 3 economy. Now what are our challenges? We still don't have a widespread national system that supports entrepreneurship on the ground. It's not going to be only startups that transform the country. Of course, they'll take the headlines, they'll raise billions of dollars, they'll become unicorns. The media loves to talk about that. But the everyday transformation that's happening is, in my opinion, equally important. So it's all parts of the pyramid, or the stack, or the buckets, or however you want to classify. The transformation's happening every step of the way. So we want to see more support for small entrepreneurs. We want to see more support for student entrepreneurs. We want to see more flexibility in India's universities and colleges. We want to see 100 IITs. Why do we have only 15 or 20? We want to see 200 IIMs. Why don't we have more diploma in business courses for anyone in India who wants to train themselves to become better at business? So we think there are a lot of unlocking required in this country to make sure every Indian has that opportunity. We don't want this gating of opportunity to only be to the companies and the builders of large corporations that are in the headlines. So okay, I can keep going on, but I think everything is set. I hope the transformation is more widespread, and certainly, in my opinion, if India does this right, it will be the only example of inclusive transformation anywhere in the world.
Well, in fact, I would say that each one of you, there is a story for everyone here. And Nikhil, I think so, your entire growth story is the most unconventional and extremely inspiring, I would say, because for someone who started at the age of 17, managed to even convince his manager at the call center that he should start investing, trading, and today he has over 1,000 clients. That unconventional method, today when we talk about India, we position ourselves as a country with cheap labor. That Bangladesh and Vietnam also did at some point. That positioning is changing. We have today, India has highly educated individuals also. Do you feel that that positioning of our country also needs to change?
I think think it is changing with time. When more Indian products are maybe used by foreigners, especially the Westerners, I think the perspective will change on the ground. In many ways, India is doing much better than the Western world. Like when I travel there now and I come back here, be it in terms of crime, be it in terms of how clean our roads are, even like on many parameters where India was once lacking, we're really picking up. So this narrative around India, I think, will organically change, and it seems to be changing. Like I was saying in my earlier comment, people seem more optimistic about India today than their own geographies itself. And this is common in the Middle East, in Europe, in Southeast Asia. Everybody is looking upon India as the next big opportunity, and I think this is the right time for us, and this is the opportunity for us to really grow at a pace like maybe comparable to China for the next 10 or 20 years.
Parsan, if I can bring you on this, if you really look at companies in India which have truly gone global, it's been the IT companies or for that matter pharma companies. What do you think should exactly be done so that perhaps in the years to come we see diversification of more companies, truly Indian companies truly going global? How do you see that?
No, I definitely think the narrative has got to change, and I wish that starting with all the media persons here itself, we should stop talking about cheap labor. We should start talking about smart labor,
right?
Smart people, because this narrative has been there for a long time, and we celebrate the Americans of Indian descent who are leading, let's say, the Fortune 50 companies. Especially, you think about FANG or any other such acronyms of the large companies. So we should start celebrating overall the tech prowess and the engineering prowess of the country. Coming to your question about, will Indian companies go global? Yeah, definitely. I mean, you're talking about pharma and IT, and of course, Infosys has been the bastion in that, and we have sound representation from ex-Infosys leadership here. But I definitely think that SaaS companies, the B2B tech companies, have already taken their products global. I mean, Zoho is an excellent example. Freshdesk is another example. So there is stuff happening, but it's still small. There aren't like hundreds of companies that we can talk about. I think that consumer-facing product and tech companies have also tried. I mean, there were times I think that Oyo and Ola and others have dabbled abroad. But I think that as exits and liquidity and more Indian companies get listed. I mean, last year we saw a few, and of course this year the market has not been kind to anyone. But I think in the next 5 years or so we'll see many of the large Indian internet companies becoming massive, not just in the Indian market, but they will expand to other geographies as well, whether it is South Asia or whether it is other emerging markets moving to Africa, MENA. That we will see. But I definitely think that Indian companies are first busy, at least the consumer facing companies are busy catering the Indian market. Right. But sooner than later, once they reach a certain scale, they want to replicate their success in other markets, especially because there are many countries where we do believe that our tech platforms can be easily replicated. Innovation from the tech perspective is not as great. I mean, I can talk about a market that we've been looking at, some markets in Middle East, etc., where we think they're evolved because they have the superb highways, amazing airports, amazing infra. But I mean, I can only speak for my sector because I'm a financial services person. You can't do an instant transaction over there. A P2P transaction of payments, which we all do on UPI, like in 5 seconds now, you can't do that in many countries of the world. In fact, even the US, ACH transaction used to take 3 days until few years ago, right before COVID. So there's a lot of innovation that we can take to other markets, even from the point of view of generating faster revenues, speeding up the growth of these companies, because India is a country of 1 billion, but the ticket sizes here are definitely small, and from a revenue and profitability perspective, it takes much longer for companies to get to a certain scale. So as an example, if a company like MobiKwik has taken 10 years to get to $100 million in revenue in the Indian market, it will probably take us 4 to 5 years to replicate that in a market where the average spend per user is high, because we can take our platform, customize it and launch it in a new market and get to that scale much faster.
Upasana, just a follow-up on what you essentially said, because the finance minister also indicated the same, that the time has come for Indian companies going abroad and putting a stamp on it, especially when it comes to payment gateway companies like yours, fintech companies like yours. There is a huge opportunity. When you look at that opportunity, do you think it's time to perhaps scale up?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I'm saying that India is a difficult market. Companies that are able to rise to even a mid-level stage, let's say they are not even in the top 5 or top 10 companies in their category in India, they have reached a certain scale where they can take their know-how of product, engineering, operations and take that mix and formula, and they've reached a certain level of success. They can definitely try their hands if they have access to capital or if they are profitable, like many other companies B2B companies generally tend to get profitable faster. They can definitely take up the agenda of going global, trying a few markets and trying to create an equivalent level of scale of business in those buckets as well.
Pranav, because we've got a very young audience, and when it comes to entrepreneurship, there's that element of fear. There's always that element of fear. So what is it that you would say in terms of the risk appetite? Would you actually tell that it is perhaps the right time to actually give wings to your dreams by going ahead with what you believe?
Yeah, from my experience, I don't think young people need to be told it's okay to take risk. That is definitely something that is de facto now. There's an impatience in young India. I'm sure all of us have seen it. There's, like I said before, there's a drive to make sure that we move ahead faster. And there's this don't care for what they say attitude that, defy the mainstream, if you will. And that's great. I think we finally have an ecosystem that allows young people to express themselves, express those energies in the right direction. But I must also say, I mentioned this before, there are 2 generations of Indians who have come before. It's not like they did not take risk either. So many Indians had to leave this country, go to the US, the UK, Europe, Australia. That was taking a lot of risk. They've pulled an entire family up because one person took that risk. So many Indians started small businesses, logistics, distribution, retail, so on and so forth. They were all taking risk. So I believe in India, we have this culture of risk taking. It is not new to us. It's been there for thousands of years. And if we allow Indians to express themselves, if we have systems and governance that sets the right boundaries and removes friction, I strongly believe we don't need Indians to be told anything. They will show us the way, for sure.
Keshav, when it comes to the risk appetite, it's going to be very important for everyone to know, because during the pandemic, when everyone was basically trying to get into a cocoon and perhaps shelter themselves by not taking ahead any risk, you decided to go ahead, increase the capex, look at expansion in sectors which your company perhaps wouldn't have really thought about it a few years ago. But you decided, look here, it's the time to go ahead, been extremely bullish about the economy, and you said that I'll go ahead. Where does the optimism really come from, Keshav? Because we're talking about the pandemic time when the thought process actually began. You finally managed to do it, but the thought process began at a time when no one was really dared to think, I would say.
Pranav said that young India is impatient. I think that is one thing that is very true. Young India is impatient. During the pandemic, whatever happened, I was seeing this TV interview where the late Shri Rakesh Jhunjhunwala was saying that everyone has this air of negativity. But if we look at long term, nothing is changing. Today it might actually accelerate. And we felt the same. We thought that going forward, there's tremendous scope in this country. Today in the morning, the IMF has set out a report saying that by FY28, India will be the 3rd largest economy in the world. So that journey seems to be accelerating. And I think that going forward, we had the conviction that India has to reach scale. We are at a fraction of where we should be. If you look at a country like China, similar population, maybe in 5 years we'll overtake them in population. Their per capita consumption of our products is 20x of what it is in India today. Now, with an increase in cash flow, with an increase in the ability to spend, Going forward, the Indian market is going to do really well. Every customer is going to have the ability to purchase things that they would not have had earlier. Earlier, companies in India had innovation, they did not have the capital. Today, if you look at it, every single company in the country has practically zero debt. Companies are getting stronger day by day. So we have this ammunition with us now, where we can grow to scale. This is something that I don't think was there 5 years earlier. And I think this is the perfect platform. So a conservative company like ours also has realized that it's now or never. So I think this is how, our thought process evolved.
Well, in fact, Keshav's company has also done the Northeast very proud, where he comes from. And what I also wanted to ask you, Keshav, is that especially if you look at companies like yours coming from areas where earlier we never thought of companies thriving, flourishing in those parts of our country. Today, your company perhaps is a living example of the potential that India has in every corner. It's not about the urban cities, it's also about perhaps talking about the Northeast or talking about the East India. Your company does that job today.
I think that's a very, very important point you've touched upon, because when people ask me, are metros going faster or rural going faster, I don't know. It's such a blurred difference today. If you look at Delhi, when you're talking about Delhi, it is very difficult to understand whether everything that is sold here, sells here, goes to Faridabad, goes to Gurgaon, so on and so forth. It is now a much more open economy because of GST. Now, urban, rural, all of these markets have access to each other, have access to products. The hassles have been reduced. Going forward, like you said, whether it is the Northeast, whether it is Calcutta, Delhi, whether it is Sambalpur, every single part of the country is going to feel the benefit of what this country has been doing, of the growing GDP, of the pace of growth. So I think that distinction now does not hold too much relevance. Going forward, it is going to be a country that grows throughout.
That's right, and we are seeing it almost in all sectors, be it even in our fraternity also, in the media fraternity also, the expansion that we have seen. Nikhil, if I can also bring you right now with regards to, we've spoken a lot about unicorns. We know our position today, extremely proud about it, ahead of countries like Germany, United Kingdom, but is it now to talk not about unicorns, hectagons is the way forward? Is that truly achievable?
So we all have a lot of cliched optimism in a way when we're on these panels. So let me take a slightly contrarian view to kind of counterbalance the optimism prevalent in the panel right now. I think we have to understand and be cognizant to the fact that the world is walking into a tough place. Globally, markets are down 25-30%. India, while we have largely been immune to that correction, many of the underlying factors for companies and entrepreneurs in the startup space are changing. Inflation is, at levels we have not witnessed in 50, 60, 100 years in many countries across the world, and one of the only few or the only tool we really have to contain inflation is taking up interest rates. So when interest rates continue to go up, they go up from like 5% to 7% to 8%, the risk-taking ability of the VC and PE funds which have been pumping money into India in the last decade will go down significantly. So to the young people watching this today, starting companies this year, in the coming years, I think you have to realize that raising money will be significantly harder tomorrow than it was yesterday. Your path to profitability will probably have to be a lot quicker. Our generation, people who have been in the startup industry in the last 15-20 years, we probably got lucky by virtue of the circumstances in the world around us back then. But the next decade will probably be a little bit harder, and the youth of today have to kind of modify their expectations and the way they run their companies based on the new world that they might be walking into.
Upasana, if I can take this question with regards to the number of policies that the government has actually started, the Startup India, Make it India. In terms of policy, what do you think would actually give that leg up in becoming a superpower in terms of what you think is the need of the hour? And of course, there's been a lot of optimism in the air, but obviously talking about the way forward, we need to look at certain areas that the government, or for that matter, entrepreneurs would like to talk about.
No, so thanks for asking that question. I think that this government, more than any other government, has had a very strong sort of theme of Startup India, Make in India. In fact, I'm quite happy that in every financial budget, there is something mentioned about fintech or digital payments, and there are SOPs of some nature or the other being provided to banks and by banks to the users. So I think the focus is amazing, and I do believe that there can be a lot of disruption. Half of the country is so young that if there is a focus on startups, not only will there be innovation in products and services which don't exist and are manual right now in the country, but it will also create a lot of employment, solve for brain drain. So coming to the question of what policies, I think that many of these movements are very good from a appeal point of view and from a media point of view, but from the real sort of business perspective point of view, I think that the stance of regulation is on, off, very conservative to very liberal, so it keeps changing. So I think from an entrepreneur's point of view, there are many entrepreneurs trying to build businesses in new and evolving sectors where we don't have companies today. I just wish that we would come up with simpler constructs of regulation, licensing, and then we would stick to it at least for 3 years or 4 years, and not keep changing things every year, because that is very, very hard for people for entrepreneurs to interpret. And there are businesses that get created, whether it is gaming or other evolving sectors, and there are some improvements based on what the judgments the courts give, and then a year later it's 5 steps backward. So these kind of things are not very nice for sort of building new age businesses. I think it creates a lot of disruption. Clarity of thought in regulation and sticking to it for some credible period of time.
Let's also get a quick word from all of you in terms of what really drives each one of you in terms of young entrepreneurs. Pranav, what is it that really drives you, and when you actually speak to a lot others, what is it that you tell them?
Well, I'll speak more about what I learn from founders every day. And there are 3 types of founders we meet. The ones who have already made it, so many on the stage. There are the next generation of leaders coming into corporate India. Again, we have that on stage as well. And then there are the new founders, the first-time entrepreneurs who are, making that very important decision to take that risk, start a company, compete in an open market, and attempt to win. I think the one prevalent common denominator for all of them is that there is true optimism for this country. There's always a reason to be negative about anything, about India, about the world, about the economy, about the rupee, about the dollar, about policy, about the prime minister. We can keep being negative on every dimension. I think the important denominator I see in all of them is that they want to make sure they will attempt what they're doing in spite of that, right? There is this I don't care, I will still try attitude. And I think if we lose that, and that comes from everything about nurture and nature, the science of that is pretty clear, but that motivation is something that we always look for, and of course we cultivate ourselves. And what drives people is different in different ways. Some people are looking for valuations, they're more skeptical on one part of the spectrum. Some people they truly live and breathe that problem. They remember something when they were 12 years old, their grandmother saw something, and that has stayed with them in their 30s, 40s, 50s. So the spectrum of motivation is also quite different. But the important thing is now we're seeing all 3 types of founders investing in becoming transformative leaders. And that is something really new. I think in the previous generation of founders, if you observe back 25 years, we see this very clear difference between the people who start companies, the founders, the promoters, if you will, and then everyone else, right? There was this very clear division in terms of thinking about the leadership structure. Today in startups, in even larger companies who are going through transformation, there is a flattening of that structure. Leaders want to live and breathe and work with the rest of the company. Everyone's on the same floor. Some founders, I'm sure, like Upasana, go and just sit on the floor with all the product developers every day and just see what's going on. And we find that change in culture between the leaders and everyone else, also within companies, is making sure this transformation is much more inclusive. So I can keep going on and on again, but I think the optimism that we have comes from seeing these things actually happening every day. The transformation is real. People are investing in improving themselves. More people are willing to take that risk themselves. And finally, of course, there's a top-down commitment to innovation. I don't think any prime minister before, to my memory since I was born, I don't remember any prime minister saying India needs to be an N trillion dollar economy. 5 trillion, 10 trillion, whatever it is. That in young India, digital India, startup India, I don't remember a prime minister going around all these states talking in, not even in English, talking in whatever language he has to make sure that regular Indians are hearing the story. Right? I don't remember even state ministers, chief ministers now are getting the inspiration. The Man Ki Baat and then the tweeting and the coup and then the Facebook Live and so on. Now even the chief ministers are under pressure to speak the same language. That is again a radical transformation in the leadership of the country. Right? So again, you see this from the floor of the startup to the halls of Delhi. That language, that vocabulary is becoming common. And that's why we're quite optimistic. We hope that is the start of something truly different.
Just a quick word also, Keshav and Upasana, from you in terms of the same. What's the driving force? And then perhaps we'll end it with Nikhil. Just a quick word on what makes you, because you're moving with every passing month, few months, you're coming up with something new. You've gone into the EV sector now. So what's that driving force?
I think, what Pranav said regarding mission. Today, I think for us, our mission statement is Sarvada Sarvottam, which means always the best. So you keep attempting to improve yourself. It's like Kaizen, continuous improvement. You try and see whatever you can do better, and you put your effort and time in trying to achieve that. Our objective is to give our customers the best products and the best services, and in order to do that, whatever needs to be done, you work towards the same. Otherwise, it's very difficult for you to go to a place that you want to reach. So I think that's it.
What about you, Upasana?
What drives me?
Absolutely.
See, apart from building the business to a scale where it can impact a very large population of India, what really drives me, I am a very social person, and I like actually creating impact with the people I work with also. So as a company, we've always had this, love for hiring people younger. And I don't mean by hiring people just out of college only. I also mean that even at leadership roles, we hire people who have the potential but have not yet become the CXO of something in their career. And then we want to give them that opportunity and help them rise into that. So what drives me is, today I know of at least 30 startups which are, some are early stage, some are mid stage, and some have already done better than us, that are founded by people who at some point of time were working with MobiKwik. So that is something I am very excited about. I am not taking any credit for their success. They were all meant to go places. But it's important to me that we played a part in their learning journey for them to get the confidence to start their own companies. Similarly, another thing that, there was a time, Pranav spoke about some very interesting changes in culture. There was a time when people traditionally in India used to look down upon failed founders. We should not look down upon failed founders. We should hire failed founders, because just because they failed in that idea that they were working on doesn't mean that they don't have the gumption, the courage, the skills to require to succeed. So I think from a people perspective, I think that's sort of what drives me, to be a part of the startup movement and to see, entrepreneurs trying not once, not twice, but third time lucky. For tens of thousands of people who failed, we do know of two Bansals who became billionaires, and on the course of doing that brought India onto the global, startup map of the world. And so I think that is sort of my, what drives me to be a part of the revolution.
Well, last word to you, Nikhil. What really drives you? We've spoken about failed founders and all, but your story constantly, each one of you, I would rather say each one of you, your stories, I'm sure, is only going to inspire everyone in this room and everyone who's listening. So one final word to you, Nikhil. What drives you?
Well, if I were to be honest, I think the fear and insecurity of not having anything to drive me probably drives me the most. To live in ambiguity is a little bit hard. But that being said, I agree with Pranav and everybody else on the panel. We have been extremely fortunate in the country to have had stable government, stable governance for close to a decade now. And often people assume that individuals are exceptional and don't pay enough, don't give enough credit to circumstances around them. And I think by virtue of the incumbent government, our Prime Minister, the circumstances around us were such that people like me, Pranav, Upasana, all of us could thrive at whatever level that each of us did, or we'd like to believe that we did. So I think thank the circumstances and hope that these continue into the future, and the next generations have similar, if not better, circumstances under which they can start their companies and they too can thrive.
Well, thank you very much, Nikhil, Upasana, Keshav, and Pranav. I think so. Each one of your stories, I would say, not only makes us believe that anything is possible. I think so. We're still at the cusp of becoming that mission superpower. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Shravan, Pranav, Nikhil, Keshav, and Upasana. Well, ladies and gentlemen, give them a bigger round of applause. This is the young change makers who are changing the world around us. Their calm, committed manner in which they conduct business. This was really an engaging session, so thank you very much. We'd like to now take a short break of just